What is going on, everybody? Welcome into Week 15's AMA, the co-stream between 4 for 4 and DLF. This is the first week of the playoffs, of the fantasy football playoffs, unless you guys have a bye. If you guys are fortunate enough to get a bye this week, good on you. But hopefully we can help out a lot of people today, make some smart decisions for the weekend to move on to round 2 of the fantasy football playoffs. Paulsen, how are we feeling? The season is winding down. It's mid-December already. We're in the playoffs. How's it going?
Yeah, it's week 15. Weather is picking up. There's a couple of 21, 23 mile per hour forecasts in Jacksonville and Miami this week, according to our weather app. So we're keeping an eye on that. And I'm still I'm reeling from, I didn't watch the game, but the Raiders got shut out 2 weeks ago. And last night they scored 63 points. I can't imagine that has ever happened in the history of the league to go from 0 to 60 or 63.
0 to 60 in 7 days.
Did not have that on my bingo card. The Raiders scoring 63, but Chargers defense doesn't look good.
Does not look good. Their offense does not look good either.
Nothing looks good.
Oof. The Raiders are averaging 31.5 points per game over the last 2 weeks. Love to see it. But yeah, we got some questions already coming in here. One of them in a couple questions from now is a question regarding last night, or at least a comment regarding last night. But first and foremost, let's see what Bo's got going on here. He's in a 12-team Superflex PPR, have 1.5 tight end premium, start 10. But he's asking, who should his Superflex be behind Trevor Lawrence? He's got Jake Browning, Baker Mayfield, Gardner Minshew, and Joe Flaco. And then we also have to pick 2 other guys for a flex, potentially 3 if Nico's out of that whole other group of guys. So we can go piece by piece here. Who should his quarterback 2 be in the super flex spot this week between Browning, Baker, Minshew, and Flaco?
That's tough. I mean, Browning has been good, but he has had a couple of pretty favorable matchups.
Right. The Vikings are
game lot.
Relatively
Vikings
tough.
They're not a good matchup. But Browning, Jacksonville pass funnel. He had 25 points against them. Indianapolis, shaky defense, 24 points, 23.7 against them. I would have a tough time benching him given that he's got back-to-back 23-plus point games. So I do have him ranked higher than Mayfield and Minshew and Flaco. So I'll just go through those other matchups. Minnesota's not a great matchup, but he's at home. He's got a good receiving core.
Sorry, I just got the news that Brandon Staley just got fired.
Okay. Well, there it is.
They literally just popped up. Fantasy Life, Brandon Staley just got fired, and so did their GM.
But the OC is safe, right? Because of Kellen Moore?
Yes, Kellen Moore is safe because he's not calling defensive plays.
He might be the interim head coach. Okay, so Tampa at Green Bay. Green Bay is kind of a run funnel. They're terrible against the run, pretty good against the pass. Mayfield should still do okay. Minshew against you could speak to your Steelers. He's at home. That should be a decent game. Mm-hmm. Flaco, I think the volume might be there. He's got, 89 pass attempts in 2 games. Mm-hmm. But the Bears are playing pretty stingy defense, both against the run and against the pass. So I'm a little worried about Flaco, and even with the volume. So to me, it's you go with the hottest guy, which is not by looks, but by fantasy production, Jake Browning. I could see, though, maybe you could speak to what you think the Steeler game is going to be like. I could see Minshew Mayfield, but I think I would still go with the player that has delivered 2 straight weeks.
My immediate gut pick was Jake Browning as well too. He's been hot. I think even though the Vikings defense has been relatively tough, they've also have allowed bigger games to quarterbacks in the past earlier this season. And that game could be potentially a reenactment of what happened last night with Nick Mullins coming in, Justin Jefferson still kind of banged up. Jordan Addison has not done anything over the past 5 weeks either. I would go with Jake Browning personally. Minshew, I think, is fine. Baker, I think, is fine. Flaco, I also like, but I just feel like you got to ride the hot hand with Jake Browning because it seemed like pieces are starting to form together. And he also has the best group of weapons to throw to out of this whole entire mess of quarterbacks as well.
Yeah, and the weather doesn't look bad. 53 degrees, 7 miles per hour. That's, we might be talking about that a lot on this stream because there's definitely some weather games out there that could be used as tiebreakers.
All right, so we got that knocked out of the way. We got picked 2 guys for the flex position out of Terry McLaurin, Deontay Johnson, Tai Chandler, Chase Brown, and Logan Thomas. Potentially 3 guys. He's currently got Nico going, but if Nico is also out, then we would need to pick a 3rd guy in there. So maybe we can give him a 3rd option here. He is projected to lose by 8, so I feel like we didn't really go for a ceiling play with the quarterback. Browning could offer some ceiling, but
I don't think there's a ceiling play there. Like, I don't think it matters a whole lot.
Maybe we'll see if we have to lean that way to kind of make up a couple extra points. But picking 2 out of these guys, I feel like Tai Chandler is one of them. I could be wrong, but I feel like he's one of them just for the touch floor with Alexander Mattison out.
Yeah, and I would probably lean towards Chandler and then McLaurin, who's kind of due. I know he's been real quiet for a stretch, but he has seen pretty good target volume. And that could be kind of a shootout in LA.
Right.
And then I would probably go with Deontay since this is PPR as well. I think Chase Brown just seems like you're starting a backup running back is dangerous in this situation. Mm-hmm. Logan Thomas is a decent start, but I still wouldn't start him over Terry McLaurin. So I would go Terry, Deontay, and Tai Chandler. Yeah, I think Nico is probably going to be out. I'm going to search for news on that right now, but he's got this calf injury and didn't practice the last 2 days. I don't know if he's practicing today.
Right. Yeah. I'm trying to see if anything's going to pop up on FLA because I'm already getting notifications on Kincaid not really practicing or being limited. And Brian Robinson hasn't practiced yesterday. So we haven't had anything from Houston camp yet. But I do think that Tyler Chandler is a locked in one. And I do like the Terry McLaurin start as well, too. I do like Logan Thomas. I agree with you. I wouldn't flex him over the wide receiver on the same team. And then I'm in full agreement.
You're more likely to get like 7 to 9 catches from Terry McLaurin or Deontay Johnson than you are.
Or a bigger splash play.
Yeah.
As well. Yep. So hopefully that helped you out there, Bo. Matt says, with Achane not practicing at all this week, would you still roll the dice with him, assuming that he's a go, or would you roll with Tai Chandler, who is now assuming the workhorse role in Minnesota with Alexander Mattison out? This is a tough call.
It is because you get this, extreme upside with Achane, but he's got this toe injury. I guess I would it's getting the rankings are fairly close. I've got it just pulled my half PPR rankings. He's at 20, Chandler's at 24, and that assumes that Achane plays. The Jets are a good matchup. They're 28th in adjusted fantasy points allowed to running backs. This is likely to be a high win game. Our weather app is showing 23 mile per hour winds. So that's going to affect the passing game. It might affect the play calling. So it could be a run heavy game, which if he's able to go, then, he's certainly dangerous. Even if he's kind of taking a back seat to Raheem Mostert. It's close. But with Chandler, I think you get probably a really high touch floor. The Bengals are not a great defense. They played a little bit better lately, but I think he could have some big plays as well. I don't think he has quite the upside that Achane does, but probably safer.
I'm probably going to go with Tai Chandler. I think the only caveat to where I would be willing to throw in Achane is if you're like projected to lose by 20 or something like that. Like you're some 6 seed that kind of got in last week and you're playing up against a much better team and you need to roll the dice on a more explosive game, then I think I would go with and hope that Achane just kind of does his thing. But I could just very easily see the Dolphins just giving the ball to Raheem Mostert a bunch and keeping Achane healthy. So that's why I would go with Tai Chandler in like 98% of situations, just for the safety.
And and we've got the Vikings playing Saturday and Dolphins don't play until Sunday, so he can't wait on Achane. he's got to make this decision tomorrow.
I'd probably
would go with the safe. I'd probably go with the safe pick here and go with Chandler. And Chandler has upside too.
He does for sure.
Yeah.
He could give you. I'm not going to say like what Zamir White I think should have done had Brandon Bolden not stolen a 25-yard touchdown. But anyway, yes, he does have upside, and I would rather not roll the dice on Chandler than him sitting, and then you have to figure out. You'd have to play. I don't know,
like some goofball. Yeah. You'd have to pick somebody up to try to
give you 2 points, and then you just gave up on potentially 15 to 20 points from Tai Chandler. Donald, this is what I was alluding to at the beginning. He said he played Austin Eckler last night. He think he got hurt in the game. Plus, the Chargers quit playing for their coach. Eckler maybe just lost the game for him this week in the playoffs. I'm sure a lot of people are probably feeling the exact same way who started Austin Eckler. Rough situation.
Yeah, heading into the season, Eckler looked like he was primed for a really good season. We also had the offensive coordinator upgrade with Kellen Moore. Very bullish on him, and he obviously had a great season last year, and he had a really good week 1, and he got hurt and just sort of derailed his season. And just coming back, he just hasn't been clicking like he did last year. It's been frustrating for sure.
Yeah, and you would think that with the backup quarterback, he might be more inclined to check it down more to Eckler, but that just didn't.
They didn't
have a bunch of time of possession though.
Yeah, I think when Easton Stick came in and last week he peppered Eckler with a few targets, but didn't really happen last night. And
especially without Keenan too. It's a weird game. That whole game last night was so weird. Yeah, but it is unfortunate for anybody that started Eckler. Yan Baggy says, Merry Christmas. We're 10 days away. Merry Christmas to you as well. Dynasty question, where do you think that Hollywood Brown is going to be next year? And then outlook for Ramondre next year as well. So Hollywood is a free agent. He could test the market and see where he could potentially go. I do think that they are more inclined to keep him, especially if they keep Kyler. I think that they're more inclined to re-sign Hollywood. So I expect him to be back in Arizona. Maybe not be like the wide receiver 1. They might draft somebody or they might bring somebody else in. But I would expect him to be back in Arizona. And then in terms of outlook for Ramondre, I don't really think anything situationally changes for them. I think Zeke is still going to be there and Ramondre is still going to be there. And it's going to be a pretty similar situation, I think, to what they had going on this year, because they just have so many other areas to fill. I mean, they're probably taking a quarterback in the first round. They need help at wide receiver. Both of their tight ends are free agents as well too. Their defense is reeling. It's just there's so many other options for them to look at than running back. And I think next year is Stevenson's final year on his rookie deal, right?
I'm not sure. I actually looked up Ezekiel Elliott. He signed a 1-year deal, so I would not be shocked if he's elsewhere. Okay. Yeah, but Ramondre was Ramondre's the RB. Contract. Yeah, he was the RB 23 through week 12 in half PPR, which is a little surprising. Well, it's a little surprising that it was that low. I don't know. I thought he was doing better than that, but I guess he
hasn't scored touchdowns. That's been the biggest issue.
Well, he had a stretch of games where he didn't do anything. That's the issue. Week 3 to 5, he just didn't do much. But I think he's good. He's missing out on a good, rest of season schedule here due to the injury. But I would expect the whole offense to be better next year. Like they
Hopefully.
Are going to probably clean house. I mean, it can't be much worse, right? But maybe they have a change of quarterback and the change of offensive coordinator, change of head coach, and things are improved.
Alexi says, hey guys, full PPR, pick 2 to start. More Tai Chandler, T. Higgins, Drake London, Kenneth Walker, Dallas Goedert. So we got in a full PPR league. So we got to pick two of these guys. Oh my goodness.
Oh, Chandler looks good as the RB1. And then Walker's kind of splitting time, but he's slightly ahead of London in my rankings, my projections, 12.4 to 11.2. I don't think I would roll with Goddard over London.
No, I kind of tossed
He's
Goddard
lower.
out.
So I think it's between, if you're picking two, I would go Chandler, and then I think it's between London for me and Walker. I guess you could put Higgins in there too, but he's just had kind of a weird year.
Yeah. Do you trust Kenneth Walker coming back from injury?
Well, my issue with Walker this week specifically, I mean, he had the game last week against San Francisco, 12 touches for 54 yards. He kind of split time there with Charbonnet, but he actually had 4 catches and 5 targets. I think he ran more routes, which was surprising because you kind of think he's more of the early down guy, and Charbonnet is the third down back. I'm worried about this matchup against Philly. They're number 1 in adjusted fantasy points allowed to running backs. So he might get there, but this is not like the Broncos or something where you have to start him. So I kind of lean London on that second spot coming off the big game.
I'm in agreement with Tai Chandler, and I'm in agreement that the second option is between Kenneth Walker and Drake London, because I kind of tossed Goddard out of this, and I don't really trust putting Higgins in my lineup. I don't honestly I really don't trust either one of these guys. London had the massive game last week, but I mean, I don't know how you could have predicted that was going to happen based on what he was doing just before that. I'd probably go with Walker and just hope that you're getting 60 or 70 yards. Maybe he gets into the end zone if the Seahawks are able to drive the ball through the air, and then he's able to finish off drives. That would be. Nico Collins is not practicing. I just got that alert. So
yeah, he's probably out. I would just mention on London, he's had double digits in PPR in 7 of his last 9 games, and 9 or 8 of his last 11. So the issue with him is that Carolina is a run funnel. The last time they played Carolina,
such a good game.
I know the last game that they played against Carolina was week 1 when he had the 1 target goose egg. So if you believe in history repeating itself, that's a problem. But I think he's a pretty hot player, like in terms of how well he's playing. The Jets, he had the bad game 2 weeks ago against the Jets, but that's pretty predictable in terms of the matchup.
I'd still go with Kenneth Walker, I think. But I would
go with London, I think.
All right. Shade Paulsen on the 50-50s. Michael says that he's a tanking team in Dynasty, could not be happier that he was able to offload Austin Eckler a couple weeks ago for a first and Jahan Dotson. Wow. I could not be happier for you either with that deal. I mean, just the fact that you were able to get a first round pick for Austin Eckler is amazing. Any first round pick, honestly, early, late, 2025, whatever it is, that's still above his value. And then you got a free Jahan Dotson, which, I mean, yeah, he hasn't been having the best of seasons, but I still believe in the talent. I believe in the player. And if anything were to happen, over the offseason with Rivera getting fired, or maybe Bieniemy becomes head coach, or maybe he goes on and they bring on a new offensive coordinator, that offense could change. And I believe in the talent of Jahan Dotson. So yeah, I could not be happier for you that you made this move either. Antonio says, "What's up, dudes? You lost Herbert and Stroud last week. Would you start Geno Smith or I almost said Danny DeVito, Tommy DeVito?"
I will say that Daigle is fairly bullish on DeVito against the Saints. I'm a little concerned about the game any game at the Superdome is pretty daunting, I think, for especially a young quarterback who hasn't played there before. Like it's really noisy and the defense is pretty stout. The matchup isn't terrible. They're 11th in adjusted fantasy points allowed to quarterbacks. So it's not like crazy or anything, but for me, I'd rather go Gino against the Eagles, who are a pass funnel at home. He's got the great receiving core. That's the way I would that's the way I would go.
DeVito hasn't passed for more than 200 yards. He's only done it
He's
once.
running. He's running, which is really raising
nice,
his floor. Yeah.
Yeah, I would play. Gino Smith has a fantastic matchup against Philly in their pass defense. So I would start Gino if he plays.
The Saints, I just will say this as a caveat to cover my butt, is that the Saints have given up the third most rushing yards to quarterbacks this year. So he could have a big running game.
I'm still playing Gino.
I am too.
Tyson in a half PPR. Would you start Evan Ingram or Trey McBride? What a fantastic problem to have here with tight ends. Oh boy.
That's a little tough because McBride has been, really consistent, big part of that Arizona offense. The matchup is not good against San Francisco. They're second in adjusted fantasy points allowed to tight ends. However, I think we're expecting Kyler Murray to have to kind of throw to stay in this game. I'm expecting, the 49ers to score a lot of points. So there could be a lot of garbage stats to be had in the second half of this game. With Ingram, he's been good, and I think with Kirk out, he's at even, his floor is higher. He's at 7. I've got McBride at 4. I think the projections are pretty close. Baltimore has a really good pass defense, but against tight ends, they're kind of middle of the road. They're 16th in adjusted fantasy points allowed to tight ends. The one other caveat with Ingram is that the wind is supposed to be really high in Jacksonville. So that might put a damper on all the passing games there, both the Ravens and the Jaguars. So right now I lean McBride, partially for that reason, but I just feel like his target floor is higher than Ingram's at this point.
I would also go with McBride as well too. Hollywood is expected to play. I got an alert with the Nico Collins not practicing, saying that Hollywood is expected to practice today, which would, in my opinion, would make me believe that he is going to play this week. But I don't really think that matters. I mean, Trey McBride has had 7+ receptions in 4 of his last 6 games. So I am going to go with Trey McBride as well. And just ride the hot hand. Jamie, in a full PPR, would you start Gus Edwards or Tyler Boyd? We got to help Jamie out here. That's
a wow.
This is where we're at. Even in the fantasy playoffs, this is where we're at. I would go with I think I might just go with Edwards and just pray to God that he falls in the end zone.
Yeah, I would say typically, you'd probably in a PPR go with the wide receiver 3 for his team over the running back 2 for his team. I do have Gus higher though, and I mentioned the wind. Like, I think this could be a run heavy game plan if they just can't throw as much as they would like. I mean, if it's 23 miles per hour, that is going to put a damper on the passing games, and they might have to kind of change their approach with their backfield and maybe not use Keaton Mitchell so much and give Gus Edwards a few extra carries. And he is more likely than Boyd to score a touchdown, and certainly more likely than Boyd to score like 2 touchdowns, which is, if you're having to start these guys, probably what you need.
Right.
So I would also go with Edwards. That's my reasoning.
Please score. I'm sorry, Jamie, that you're in that predicament. And Tyson said, then for flex, would you start the other tight end? So in this case, would you start Evan Ingram or Deontay Johnson or T. Higgins?
And this is full PPR? No, half PPR.
Half PPR. To be honest with you, I think I would play Ingram. I almost said that I would like to try to find a way to play both McBride and Ingram. And given these other 2 options, I think Ingram becomes a very viable flex option. Deontay's been up and down, and Mitch Trubisky sucks. And Higgins has just been weird. So I think I would play Evan Ingram.
So I would I have Deontay slightly ahead of Ingram, and I don't hate the Ingram call. I would watch out for that weather because I'd rather play Deontay in a dome than Evan Ingram in 20-mile-per-hour winds. So
Fair. Even
and I
though
think
Deontay is catching passes from Mitch Trubisky.
Mitch Trubisky was, a fine starter for many years in this league. He's fine. Is he better than Kenny Pickett? He might
be. No, he's not.
I don't know.
No, he's not.
I have Higgins below those two, by the way. Lack of trust there right now.
E Beats with a $5 super chat. Thank you so much, E Beats, for the support. He says, should he start Joe Flacco over Geno Smith, or would you also, or you could also grab Drew Lock, I guess, off of waiver wires in a super flex league. He also has Josh Allen as his quarterback 1, so that at least is going to raise the floor here a little bit against the Cowboys. But Flacco or Geno, if Geno is healthy.
I think Gino probably plays. So I would go with Gino over Flacco if he plays. And then, Locke, I was kind of expecting a disaster last week. And it wasn't a disaster. It was actually, his final numbers were pretty good. 269, 8.7 yards per attempt, two touchdowns, 2 interceptions. So that strikes me as a guy who can put up garbage numbers against the Eagles pass funnel. So I think if we knew today that Gino was going to be ruled out, then I would probably have Locke ahead of Flacco. Now, the issue with Flacco is the matchup against the Bears. They've been really good against the run and the pass. And he might get there because of the volume, but they have some issues on the offensive line. The Bears are rushing the passer. So it's going to be a kind of a grind for Flacco to get there.
I would definitely, I'm all in on the Gino over Flacco. And I think I agree with you that by that kind of property, just to play the gunslinger of Drew Lock against
just as a like inside baseball or whatever, I have Gino at 17, Flacco at 20. And if Gino were ruled out today, I'd probably have Locke at 19 ahead of Flacco, but behind like Gardner Minshew and Baker Mayfield.
I like it. Hopefully I helped you out, E-Beats, and hopefully Gino plays for you. And then you can just don't even have to worry about it. You got Geno Smith. Jelly of the month. Hey guys, have PPR. Wait to see if Achane plays or is this. Do we have the same question? Matt had the same exact question. Everybody's wondering about Achane or Tai Chandler. So we said go with Tai Chandler. Now, does it change at all if with Kincaid or Keaton Mitchell over Tai Chandler? In terms of
Kincaid Kincaid is questionable.
I don't even think he's going to play. I think I saw.
You don't think he's going to play?
I saw a thing saying that he was
in a red non-contact jersey as of yesterday. Yeah, he's got 2 different injuries, I think. Mitchell's not a terrible pivot. So, and I don't know. I'm trying to look up Achane. I don't know if he's practicing. If he's a DNP today, and then Miami plays Sunday. So, everyone else will practice. So it sounds like Achane will practice today. It just seems like if he's dinged up, there's a good chance of re-injury. There's a good chance that they sort of limit his snaps.
Yep.
I don't know if they'll have. Wilson will be active, right? I know he was behind Ahmed for a while, but Ahmed's out still. So, they have capable guys below him on the depth chart that can handle more of a load. I worry about Achane's touches, I guess. He does have that sky-high upside, but I think I would go with Chandler on Saturday because, Mitchell should be pretty good, Keaton Mitchell, but, he's only going to get 10, 11 touches probably. That's what he's been seeing and he's been the RB1 for Baltimore. It's just a full committee there. So I think Chandler is the one that's got the highest touch floor, and he's got a pretty good matchup. And he's really fast, so he could break one too.
I'm sticking with Tai Chandler, but again, with the caveat of if you wanted to, if you're projected to lose by so much, like 20 points or something like that, and you were rolling the dice with Achane, then I would do that over Chandler. And then Mitchell, I don't think is a bad pivot after the fact of a lighter version of Achane. But Tai Chandler, again, in like 98% of circumstances. $2 super chat from Sammy. He just wanted to say thank you for the intel and that he appreciates us. We appreciate you, Sammy. Thank you so much for the support. Another tight end question in half PPR. Would you go with David Njoku or Jake Ferguson this week? I'm going with Ferguson.
That one's another close one. And that's why we're getting these questions. I mean, I have Ferguson at 8.2 in half PPR and Njoku at 8.9. The lean is for Njoku just coming off that giant game. And Chicago is a bit vulnerable against tight ends. They're middle of the pack in terms of fantasy points allowed to the position. Ferguson, though, has a good matchup as well. Buffalo, the 22nd in that metric. I don't know. I just, with Njoku having such a big game last week, it just seems like he and Flaco have a pretty good rapport. I don't think you can go wrong with these. These guys are both in my top 8. My lean is to Njoku.
Feels like another situation where I would love to see who your flex option is to see if you can get both these guys. I honestly don't have a problem with Njoku either. I think that this Cowboys Bills game is going to kind of be nuts. So I like going in on the options there. And Ferguson has been really good over the past 2 weeks. He doesn't have the big explosive game that Njoku had, but he's been super solid.
So if you want to go with like chances of scoring a touchdown, or just the over under on the Bills game is 50.5. And I'm sure that Browns is under 4. Yeah, they're 37.5. So your chances for a touchdown or 2 are probably great, are probably greater with Ferguson. I might end up moving him ahead or moving Njoku down. Yes. It's just hard to forget just Njoku running free all last week and Flaco hitting him with pretty elite passes.
Yep. But I'm still going Ferguson.
Yeah.
Dragon Ball, should he start DeAndre Swift or Ezekiel Elliott this week? It's actually a really good question considering the usage that both of these guys got last week has pulled them very, very close.
I'm going Elliott. I know Swift's matchup is better. Seattle's 29th in just fantasy points allowed to running backs. I can't count on him to get a touchdown or get a goal line carry, whereas you can with Elliott if he does. And just the sheer usage that Elliott saw last week, that puts me in his camp for this particular question.
Also, Team Zeke not competing with anybody. Nobody's, like you said, nobody's stealing goal line work. Nobody's stealing. I mean, nobody's stealing like receiving work really from Swift, but like Gainwell is there. Zeke doesn't really have anybody like that. So I would just go with Ezekiel Elliott, who gets like 100% of the workload over Swift. Jelly of the month again, other league, but better stash defense. Denver versus New England or Buffalo versus the Chargers. Man, this is a really good question because both offenses are bad.
And then
this is for next week, right? So for week 16. So I'm going to see if there's a tiebreaker here.
I want to see who's at home and who's on the road because that matters. Denver's at home. Buffalo's at Chargers.
So I went to check the tiebreaker. My tiebreaker was who does each of these defenses play in week 17? And so the Buccaneers the Broncos in Week 17 play at home against the Chargers, and the Bills play at home against the Patriots. So it's just like these two teams just play the other team.
These four teams play each other, kind of, yeah. I probably would lean Denver at home. I mean, both offenses are pretty dysfunctional.
Mm-hmm.
Zappy's been a little better than Mac Jones has, but if the Chargers are just quitting, then they'd probably be the play, right? But I don't, that game's in the dome, right. And I like Denver at Mile High. Maybe you get some weather.
Yeah, I'll go with Denver. Can you pick up both these defenses so that your opponent doesn't have the option to have the other one? That might be a play. But if you had to pick one of them, I think I would go with Denver as well too. And yeah, Clay. Hey guys, always love the content. He needs some help. 12-team full PPR needs to start 2 guys out of Deontay Johnson, Jake Ferguson, Kenneth Walker, Zeke Elliott, and Jahan Dotson. So all these questions have led to this one question of all these guys that we already talked about. So out of all of these guys, if you had to start 2 of them in a full PPR league, Zeke Elliott for me is one of them. Just because of the touch floor and stuff that we talked about. I kind of tossed Jahan Dotson out. I've tossed Jake Ferguson out just because I think you have a better option to go with Walker or Deontay. So the second one for me would be I think I'm going both running backs.
Yeah, full PPR, that's how it shakes out. 12.4 for Walker, 11.2. I was narrowing it down the same way. Deontay's kind of tempting in the dome.
Trubisky, man.
Yeah. And Walker has the bad matchup against Philly, but, I've got him projected for about 58 total yards. He was running a lot of routes. And then I've got Deontay for 55 receiving yards. So it really comes down to who scores a touchdown. Deontay, I think, has one in each of the last 2 games, but Walker probably, as the running back, has a better chance.
Right.
To score. So I probably would do the same thing, go with both running backs. I think Zeke's a must play of this group.
I basically shot him straight up to number 1. So both running backs for you there, Clay. Tyson, he needs to start 2 wide receivers and a flex. He corrected in the second one. So 2 wide receivers and a flex out of Jefferson, Diggs, Saquon, Moss, and Olave.
So the names have elevated here. I had to scroll up the rankings here to find these players.
Saquon is my flex. Diggs is one of my wide receivers. So then would you go between Jefferson and Olave? Do you trust Jefferson with Nick Mullins? Ooh, man, it's so hard to sit Jefferson, but I'm so scared of that. He came in and had like 3 catches and then left. And that's something that could kill you. But I think just based on the usage that he has, the fact that he is Justin Jefferson, I can't imagine getting booted from the playoffs because you had Justin Jefferson on your bench when he was healthy and played. So I think I'm playing the first 3 names here. Jefferson, Diggs, Saquon.
I think so too. Barkley at 9 in the flex rankings. Diggs at 15. Jefferson at 28. Olave's got an ankle injury. He's at 41. And then Zach Moss is actually pretty high. He's at 18. So you could say Moss over. Wait a second. You have to start 2 receivers.
2 receivers and then
flex. So then I would go with Saquon over Moss, and then Diggs and Jefferson at receiver as well.
Hopefully you get Jefferson back and playing the whole game.
You get proper Justin Jefferson.
Oh, Darren Waller looked like he would play on Sunday.
He's coming back.
Oh, interesting. Michael Kane, 12-team Dynasty League with 6 keepers and a full PPR. First week of the playoffs. Need to start 3 guys out of Kamara, Moss, Mostert, Chuba, and David Montgomery. So can we just say we need to start 1 out of Moss, Chuba, and Montgomery? I think that's because Kamara and Mostert for me are locks out of this. So we need a 3rd out of Moss, Chuba, Montgomery. And I think based on what you were saying, you would go with Moss.
Yeah, I've got Moss at 11 in running back rankings. I like Montgomery as well. He's got a nice matchup against Denver, but he's splitting time. Moss isn't splitting time. I think the concern with Moss is that if you are worried about his last couple games, which have been last couple games, 19 for 51 against Tennessee, 13 for 28 against Cincinnati, sub 2.7 yards per attempt. It just hasn't clicked like it was earlier in the year. And if you are a believer in recency, we call it recency bias. Sometimes it's just a trend that's happening. Mm-hmm. Then you might want to go with, I think, with Montgomery or Chuba, who I think are safer options, because you might get another clunker out of Moss, but I think he also has the most upside. This is a tough one because you could see Montgomery against Denver having 2 touchdowns.
Right. Yeah.
And
I think Montgomery is the 3rd one for me.
I think he's got a lower touch floor than Moss does, but maybe a higher yardage floor, if that makes sense.
And I think better touchdown equity.
Yeah, definitely Kamara, definitely Mostert in terms of what's going on here. But Moss is a bit worrisome.
Moss doesn't have that much more of a touch floor, I don't think. Like if you look his last 3 games, 10, 21, 17, and then you look at Montgomery has had 15, 19, 13. So, I mean, they're relatively similar, and Montgomery scored a touchdown in 4 of the last 5 games. So for me, I'm going with David Montgomery as my 3rd option with Kamara.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to revisit Moss's projection because when I initially ran projections, he came in at 2 or 3 because the system is expecting a normal rushing game from Indianapolis, but it's been really bad the last couple weeks. So how bad is it really, or do they bounce back against Pittsburgh? But yeah, I'm looking at these names below him and I'm like, I think I'd start all these guys over him. So I need to revisit that. I'm going to go with Montgomery as well as my 3rd.
Tyson, flex PPR, Josh Downs, Odell Beckham Jr., Jackson Smith and Jigba, or a now healthy Demario Douglas, who's off of the concussion protocol. Oh boy. JSN went to my head immediately, just given the matchup. But I feel like him and Josh Downs, I feel like are similar. Like they're both going to have like 4 receptions for 30 yards. And that's just kind of it. I don't really want OBJ. Demario Douglas might be the play here with him being back and fully healthy. Juju had a really good game last week. So if you put Demario Douglas in as the wide receiver 1 for New England, I might go with that.
The projections say Beckham pass funnel against Jacksonville. He has had a couple of really good games in the last. Well, he's had actually 4 good games in the last 5. So he had 5 for 56 and a touchdown against Seattle, 1 for 40 and a touchdown against Cleveland, which is a little bit lucky because he only had 2 targets in that game. 4 for 116 on 7 targets against Cincinnati. Then he only posted 3 for 34 on 5 targets against the Chargers. But then he had 4 for 97 and a touchdown on 10 targets last week against the Rams. And he's seeing he saw 10 targets on 53% of the snaps. But that snap usage is actually up from the 4 previous games. He was only playing 33% of the snaps from week 10 to week 12. And I think he came out of the bye healthier, and so they're using him a bit more now, and this is a nice matchup against Jacksonville. Again, the caveat with Jacksonville game is that the weather. So if they're dealing with 20-mile-per-hour winds, you might want to pivot to one of these other guys. And the next guy that I have in the projections is Smith and Jigba due to the fantastic matchup with the Eagles.
So yeah. Like I said, I went straight to JSN basically.
I just think I think Beckham has been hotter and more consistent part of the passing game with Mark Andrews out. But
that's true.
I'm not worried about Beckham the player. I'm worried about Beckham the weather.
Beckham the weather.
And I think DeMario's like, he's fine for 10 points, but is he going to ever score a touchdown? He has one, right? Or does he have two? He doesn't have a touchdown. I think he had one or two that got called back. Like he scored 11 and a half, 7, 8, and then 10, 14, 11. So he's good for like a floor. But I think if you want any sort of ceiling, I would go with Beckham.
That might be the answer right there. What more do you kind of need for ceiling? Kind of go with that as the barometer for JSN versus OBJ.
And Downs, just to comment on Downs, like he had that 13 target game. And since then, and he only had 5 for 43 in that game. And then since then, in a good matchup against Tennessee, 5 targets, 3 catches. In a pretty good matchup against Cincinnati, 3 targets, 3 catches. So it's not like he's the Josh Downs that we saw midseason. Might be hitting the rookie wall.
Mm-hmm.
I thought he'd be healthier coming out of the bye, but it doesn't seem like he's doing much.
No, it's been unfortunate. Antonio is asking if Eckler's 9 PPR points get him bounced from the playoffs. What is a reasonable return that you can expect if you're trying to flip him to a playoff team? So this is sort of a dynasty. What's that look next year? Is he just done? I mean, I would love to get a first-round pick. I don't think you're getting a first-round pick. And that could be a 25 or a 26 first to sell Eckler. If it's any first-round pick over the next 3 years, I'm in. Don't know if you're going to get that. Maybe you can try to get a couple of seconds or a upside player like an Antonio Gibson in a second because Gibson is a free agent. Maybe his situation improves next year. I am just kind of on the train of I'm not going to say Eckler's done, but it just feels like he's kind of like Zeke right now or Dalvin Cook because he's going to be a free agent. I don't think he's going to be back in LA. I expect him to kind of take more of a smaller contract to just be a 1B somewhere else, you know? And I don't think he's going to get the Fournette treatment and not sign for half the year. But, I mean, Dalvin Cook and Zeke, I think, are perfect examples of players that signed to essentially be backups or at best 1Bs, and they just haven't done anything. I mean, Zeke's just now doing something because the starters hurt. But if that's the upside you're getting from Eckler, I almost want to say just get kind of almost anything. But I would keep Eckler over a third. But if you can get, like I said, 2 seconds or an upside shot on a player in a second, would be great. And the first would just be amazing.
He had a good week 1. He's turning 29 in May next year, so that's just one thing to keep in mind. He looked great in week 1. He had 16 carries, 117 yards, 7.3 yards per carry against the Dolphins. He also had 4 catches for 47 yards on 5 targets. Like that was what we were expecting. Then he misses 3 games with this ankle injury. And then coming out of the ankle injury, spell that he was out, he had 27 yards rushing, 45 yards rushing, 29 yards rushing. And then he got it going. Even with that third game against Chicago, he ended up with 7 for 94 as a receiver. So he had 3 straight games where he had 21 points. That seems so long ago.
It really does.
Right? Then he had sub 10 for 3 straight games. Then he had another good game last week against Denver, but that's like the best matchup possible. He had a great matchup last night and didn't do anything. But I don't know. I didn't watch a game. Did he get injured?
People were saying that might have been, he might have had like a hidden injury or something, or they just kind of pulled him.
He's averaging 3.7 yards per attempt this year. And I agree with you. Like, his contract's up. He's probably going to be like a pass catching specialist. I don't think he's done. Like, I think he's going to have some more big Eckler games, but the bell cow 18 to 22 touch era is probably over for him. I think he's still, I think this, we see this all the time where these a high ankle sprain or something just derails a player's season and he's never quite the same that year until the next year.
Super unfortunate. We answered the question a little earlier. Quinn, not sure if you saw it. Flaco or Gino? We said Gino. Assuming that he plays. Vito needs to drop 1 in a full PPR between all of these guys. He was going to drop Palmer after the game, but he had a good game. Honestly, I think Palmer might still be the drop because I can't imagine playing Palmer over Chase or Rashid Rice based on what he's been doing recently, or even London or Amari with Joe Flacco presumably starting for the remainder of the year for Cleveland. It raises Amari's stock. I kind of feel like it is still Josh Palmer.
Yeah, you have Easton Stick, quarterback. Like, do we get another 100-yard game out of Palmer? He's the wide receiver 1 there, so you got that going for you. What about these running backs? Gibson is interesting this week due to the Brian Robinson injury. And so he could, if Robinson's hamstring injury, he set out, he had the bye to heal, and it looks like he's not going to play.
Yeah.
I don't know if he's ruled out. I saw an alert, but I didn't read it.
He is out.
So you don't really want to cut Gibson at this point. Najee is, doing pretty well. Tai Chandler, right, is the starter right now. How long is he the starter? I probably would go with Josh Palmer as well. Cut him. But, he did have a great game.
Yep.
You're starting Kyron every week. I think you're a little weaker at receiver, so it would make sense to cut a running back, but
I can't. I would say Gibson if Brian Robinson was coming back in. That would be the easy one. But with Robinson out, and he hasn't practiced at all this week, and I don't know if he practices again next week. So it just seems like Gibson. I almost would rather just play keep away if you're in the playoffs with those running backs than give one of your opponents one of these running backs. And Josh Palmer. I don't know. I would feel a lot better if I saw my opponent was starting Josh Palmer against me than any of those running backs. So that's kind of
if they were starting, and we don't know what Alexander Madison's injury, how bad that ankle is. Like, the initial report I heard was high ankle.
Right. That could be an issue. Multiple weeks.
Which would be multiple weeks, which is why you wouldn't want to cut Chandler.
Right. Palmer had 4 for 113 and 1 last night, but he had an 80-yard touchdown. So his other 3 receptions, he had 30 yards in a game where they passed the entire time. So, yeah, I would cut Palmer. Start 1 for upside if you are the underdog, thanks to Eckler. Higgins, Downs, Hollywood, or Christian Watson.
I don't think Christian Watson's going to play unless he made some return to practice.
I didn't think he was playing either.
He has a lot of upside, but I don't think he's going to play. So then you're looking at Higgins, down, Hollywood. So I think for me it's just because I mentioned Downs has been pretty bad. Higgins is starting to show a little bit of life. Hollywood's been kind of bad.
This will be Hollywood's first week off of the injury. I don't know if that concerns you.
He's got a heel injury, right? I think he was able to play through it before this and is having trouble this week practicing.
Plus, they play the Niners.
And they had the bye. I think I go with Higgins in this one.
Yep. 70-plus yards in 2 of the last 3 games for Higgins. He only had 2 receptions last week, but 70 yards. I would go to. I think T. Higgins is the best talent of these 4. And
blasphemy. Just kidding.
Yeah, so Watson would have been my answer if he was playing, but he's not. I don't think he's playing. So if Watson plays, you're playing him. I don't expect him to.
I guess I don't think I want my brain to go there. Where would I rank him? I mean, it depends on his, if he's like limited today and questionable, I don't think I would have him ahead of Higgins, who's healthy.
All right, we don't need that bad.
Yeah.
We can just keep Higgins.
I'll just go with Higgins.
Jeepster in a half PPR league. Another if Achane sits. Romeo Dobbs, Zay Jones, CEH, or Jarrett McKinnon in the flex. Oh. Am I picking Jarrett McKinnon here? I might pick Jarrett McKinnon.
Let's see.
I think I have bias towards McKinnon because he almost single-handedly won me a league that I should not have won last year because of what he did this time last year. So I feel like I have that memory still in my brain where I'm just like, oh, McKinnon. He's back in that role. He's going to do it again. You can prove me wrong.
McKinnon is the highest in the flex rankings at 10.1. Edwards-Helaire at 9.9. Dobbs is a sneaky start this week due to the matchup against Tampa. If Watson sits, I do like Dobbs as like a potential 2-touchdown guy. But he hasn't been like a huge yardage guy.
Right.
He's kind of like a possession receiver for them. He hasn't gone over 100 yet this year. He did have 9 for 95 against Detroit in week 4. 4 for 72 against KC 2 weeks ago. Steady usage, but he hasn't caught a touchdown in the last 3 games. I think that probably changes because he had 4 in the previous 5 games. I think he probably does a touchdown this week against the Bucs. But McKinnon, we've seen it. He has 2 touchdown upside, and the Patriots are a tough rushing matchup, but they are in the top 10 in receptions allowed to running backs and receiving yards allowed to running backs. So it is a pretty good matchup for him.
Team McKinnon. And just we did just get the notification from Fantasy Life that Christian Watson is not practicing, and Isaiah Pacheco was also not at practice either, to just kind of verify both of those. What do we think of Tua? That's just the question. Oh, we have a super chat.
He's a nice guy. He's handsome. He's a lefty. He's a lefty, right?
He is a lefty.
He's got a great receiving core. I think you're asking like about the matchup. The matchup's terrible. The Jets are number 1 in adjusted fantasy points allowed to quarterbacks. He didn't have a very good game last time they played the Jets. There's also projected to be forecasted 23-mile-per-hour winds in Miami. And
I'm getting alerts all day that McDaniel is preparing to not have Tyreek Hill this week.
Really?
Yes.
That really that's going to put him below
a lot of people.
I don't, given this matchup as well, 58% chance of rain. So I'm not optimistic that this is certainly not optimistic this is going to be a ceiling type game for him.
Yeah.
That's an understatement.
My favorite tweet from last week, when Tyreek was not playing, when he was in the locker room and whatnot, was somebody tweeted out Tua without Tyreek, and it was just a headshot image of Mac Jones.
Oh boy. Wow.
So
he still has Waddle, but they're getting really thin at receiver. Cedric Wilson. They don't really have a tight end, Durham Smythe.
Right.
So the way
by Sauce.
Like Mike McDaniel's a smart coach. He's going to run the ball, and he'll do it over and over again because that's where you can beat the Jets.
Mm-hmm. Hobo Fraggins with the $5 super chat. Thank you so much for the support. He says that he lost Brian Robinson for this week. So for the first round of the playoffs, should he play Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Gus Edwards, or Keaton Mitchell? I think we both are in agreement of Keaton Mitchell.
Yeah, I've got him the highest at 31, Edwards-Helaire at 33, and Gus Edwards at 40. Yeah, I mean, I think Keaton Mitchell right now is the RB1A. Probably the most likely to have a big game for the Ravens. I mean, you could see Edwards, if the wind's like crazy, seeing a lot of carries, but I certainly lean Mitchell over him and over Edwards-Helaire as well. I mean, the Patriots are a pretty bad matchup for running backs in general. They're third in adjusted fantasy points allowed to that position.
Keaton Mitchell. Thank you for the super chat, Hobo Fraggins. And then we also got a $2 super chat from Caleb, who's asking Trey McBride or Dalton Schultz. And I feel like we can both agree on Trey McBride.
Yes. And the one caveat with Schultz is that if he does play, which it looks like he's trending that way, with the receiving core the way it is, if it was Stroud, then I would feel a lot better about him being in the top 6 or 7 this week, just from a volume standpoint. But with Davis Mills at quarterback, we just don't know who he's going to pepper with targets. So I'm going to stick with McBride, who has been a consistent part of the passing game since Kyler Murray came back.
Boom. All right. You got a few more minutes. You can rapid fire some of these start sits.
Let's knock it out here.
Let's do it. Help some people for their first round of the playoffs. Or if anybody has any super chats, we will get to those. We can just rapid fire some of these. Let me see if I find any names that we haven't really talked about. Waddle or Zay Flowers? We kind of just hinted about Waddle with Tyreek potentially out. But he gets Sauce Gardner, bad weather. Would you play him or Zay Flowers?
I think from a volume standpoint, I probably would end up with Waddle if Tyreek is out, which I guess is we're kind of assuming that right now, or at least talking about it. Right now I have Waddle at 24, Flowers at 25, so it's close. The matchup with Jacksonville is a lot better. They're 29th in adjusted fantasy points allowed to receivers. The Jets are first, so the worst matchup possible. But if Tyreek is out, you would expect Waddle to see 12 targets, something like that. I mean, that's hard to pass up, even if they are against the Jets. So I would lean, I think, Waddle, but I would check the projections if you're a subscriber, if and when Tyreek is rolled out.
I think I would probably still roll with Waddle too, but it's definitely very close. Goddard or Isaiah Likely? And I don't know if this is by standard, you mean non-PPR? Is that what that means?
Yeah, it's the standard standard used to just be standard, and then PPR came along, so now standard is non-PPR.
Right, people have been talking about this. It is standard scoring, the default for ESPN or Yahoo or whatever, which is PPR. But do you have a preference between Goddard or Likely?
I would go with Likely coming off the big game. Better matchup, has been a bigger part of the offense. However, again, the weather in Jacksonville, if it's super windy, then I would probably switch it to Goddard. They're 10 and 11 in their rankings.
Zeke, Olave, Achane, or Puka for a flex? You on Puka or Zeke?
Is this what scoring format? Because I think that might matter in this one.
Just assume a half.
Half PPR. Supposed to rapid fire these, right?
Yep.
Pulling up my flex rankings just to see. I think Zeke is interesting, but it looks like Demario Douglas is back. Devontae Parker might be back, so he has a little bit more target competition.
Puka gets Washington.
Yeah.
I'm going Puka.
I don't hate it. It's 14.1 projected for half PPR for Elliott, and then 12.9 for Puka. But as you mentioned, the Washington matchup is just fantastic.
Washington defense. Aaron Jones or Devon Achane? Assuming that they both play.
I go Achane. Both could be limited, and we've seen Jones limited, but Keep an eye on AJ Dillon too, because if he's out, that might change how much they have to use Jones. But they could still even split work with him and Patrick Taylor. So I think I would go with Achane with these two.
Kyler or Tua? You're going Kyler, especially if Tyreek is out.
Yeah, if Tyreek's out, Kyler. I'm gonna drop Tua to like 17 or something. If Tyreek's out, I think I'd have him below Gino.
Well, what about Jordan Love, Gino, or Kyler?
Jordan Love against the pass funnel Bucks at home. He plays well at home. I think they bounce back and have a good passing outing.
And how do you feel about Colts or Bears defense? I think I would lean Colts.
Colts in the Dome
against Mitch Trubisky.
Against Pittsburgh against Mitch Trubisky. I had the Colts higher. Bears aren't a bad play though, but I had the Colts higher slightly.
You're going Zach Wilson or Joe Flacco?
Flacco.
Also going Flacco. With Tyreek out, would you start Waddle? Also has Justin Jefferson, and then has CD, Ayuk, Waddle, Cup.
I don't know how many people he has to start here. I guess I'll put these in order for him. I would go Cup. What's CD?
Lamb.
Oh, CD for sure. Cup. And then probably Ayuk over Waddle, yeah. And then Justin Jefferson is in there. I think Waddle will be the last of these.
I agree.
This group.
Cup's got the matchup. Ayuk is awesome. Never sitting Lamb. Demario Douglas or George Pickens?
I have to play one crying face emoji.
Yeah.
Douglas, I think he gets you a nice floor. We don't know what we're going to get from Pickens.
Mitch Trubisky sucks. Defense question: Jets, Rams, Colts. I feel like this is Colts again.
I don't know. Like if Tyreek is out, that whole game against the Dolphins changes. Rams are up there. They're fifth in my rankings. Colts are 14th. Right now the Jets are sitting at 19th, but that assumes Tyreek plays. And I think if he doesn't, the line's going to change and these rankings will change. And I would go with the Jets with a shorthanded Tua. Also, again, the weather there might make it very one-dimensional what the Dolphins are going to try to do. But I think the Rams are actually a stronger play than the Colts.
I like it.
Rams are a good play against Washington. Yeah.
Washington is traveling across the country.
I'm just saying the Jets might move up the rankings
with Tyreek out.
With Tyreek out, if he's out.
With the news of Darren Waller potentially playing, would you play him or Taysom Hill?
Taysom. Would like to see Waller with DeVito. I mean, unless you're really desperate, I would like to see Waller with DeVito a game or at least one game to see what sort of usage rapport they have before running him out there. But he's playable as like a high-end tight end too. But I think Taysom, he's seen such a big role there that he has a high ceiling.
And then at the buzzer, we got Thomas with a $2 super chat. He needs a flex position. Just one of these guys between Michael Wilson, Noah Brown, Jahan Dotson, and Adam Thielen.
Thomas, what's the scoring system?
Ooh, hit us. I think regardless of the scoring system, I feel like Thielen is probably my answer. I don't know if I trust Noah Brown with Davis Mills. I don't know if I trust Michael Wilson in his first week back from injury with Hollywood Brown also still there. I don't know if I trust Jahan Dotson just in general. Full PPR.
Then I would go Thielen as well. I mean, Noah Brown's kind of tempting, but as you mentioned, we have this court. We just know that the Carolina passing games kind of stinks. But Thielen at least has provided some good games and is the most likely probably of this group to maybe get a touchdown or at least get 5 or 6 catches.
Yeah. And I think Terrell AJ Terrell might shadow Mingo on the outside more, if that kind of gives you a narrative of not having the top defensive coverage. So I think I would lean with Thielen because he's shown the most out of these 4 all year. So, yeah. But to anybody else that did not get their question answered, you can leave a comment in the replay of this stream on the 4for4 side. I believe Sal still answers those questions. And then on the Dynasty side, I answered the questions as well.
Robert he's asked the question 3 times.
Oh, Robert.
Russell Wilson or Jared Goff. Now he's asking it a 4th time. He's copying and pasting. He's spamming us. So I don't know if I should answer, but I would go with Wilson.
I don't know if I should answer, but
it's a better matchup again. I mean, I do like Goff generally at home, but the Denver defense is so bad against the run that I think this is a Jahmyr Gibbs. He's still spamming. Jahmyr Gibbs, David Montgomery game. And then, on the flip side, I think Denver can throw it pretty well against the Lions secondary, which is really struggling. They have a tough rush defense too, the Lions generally. So
yep.
I think it sets up better for a Wilson game.
And there we go. Hope everybody go ahead.
You're in probation, Robert.
No, he's going, man. He's going. There, I've noticed that there is a lag between like where we are, and there might be, I don't know, maybe about 10 seconds of lag. So we've already. But yeah. So again, if anybody did not get their question answered, you can drop a comment in the replay of this, and you can get your question answered. Especially on the Dynasty side, I'm the person that answers any and all Dynasty questions on DLF in comments and stuff. So we hope everybody has a fantastic weekend. Hopefully, you guys do amazingly this week in the first week of the playoffs. Hopefully, you win all of your matchups in advance to the semis in week 16. Or if you already have a bye, then enjoy the games this week and just relax. So I can't say hopefully that you lose this week if you want to lose in Dynasty, because if you're not in the playoffs, your draft pick is already set. So can't say that anymore. But hopefully you guys have a fantastic weekend. We'll catch you next Friday for week 16 for the semifinals. Peace.